Another little variation I like to throw in with that interpretation of the Ratamacue is the cymbal, crash, and bass drum. Back to the single Ratamacue triplet variation. Substitute that first note with a cymbal and a bass drum. You can also play the first note of the left Ratamacue. So first note. The variation I like to play with the double Ratamacue triplet interpretation is to play the crash on the beginning of that grouping. Rather than like I did in the single Ratamacue. I don't know why, that's just the way I like it. You can work out this double paradiddle, double Ratamacue variation. Suppose that would sound pretty cool, but honestly I haven't worked that up. I mentioned this, and I'm leaving this in the video because I wanted to convey the idea that when you work out these kind of ideas and familiar patterns that you can get really comfortable with, I recommend just sticking with the ones that feel good and not necessarily working out every possible variation you can think of. I spent a lot of time as a younger player thinking that every variation I thought of I needed to master, and then I ended up getting discouraged because really there could be so many variations that you could work up with just this idea. So I worked through them. Initially, I worked through these patterns and tried a lot of different things, but once I found the ones I liked, I stuck with them and I just set the other ones aside. And that way I know I have the one that I really want to play. It's going to sound really good, and I don't have to worry about every single variation. That's kind of a notion I think that gets instilled in us as younger players, because it is important when you're first starting out to have your hands sound even. Start everything with your right, start everything with your left, get your double stroke sounding even. But as you mature as a player and start getting into more complicated patterns around, especially around a drum set, I think it's important to kind of weed out the stuff that doesn't sound as good to your ear and keep the things that do sound good to your ear. So if it happens to be all right hands, stick with all right hands, or whatever pattern that feels good and sounds good to your ear. Pick those out, set those aside, get them down real tight, and you can set aside the other ones. So I mean, save the hand balancing exercises, for your practice pad, or if you're into snare drum playing or marching band playing, that's when that's called for. But I think drum set playing calls for whatever sticking works. Back to the double Ratamacue variation that I like to play, has the crash on the beginning of the grouping. Move that around. Play it as 16th note triplets, 1 and 2 and. And the triple Ratamacue with the crash on the beginning of the grouping. So that would be. And now for the variation that started this whole idea of reinterpreting the snare drum rudiments. It's Steve Gadd's interpretation of the Ratamacue. It's in his video Up Close. Please go pick it up. You'll learn a lot. It's one of the best drum videos you'll ever see. In it, he explained that he liked to go over the Ratamacue, or the rudiments, and experiment with ending them with bass drum notes. And he went through and demonstrated. I'll let him show you on his video. Please go pick it up. But what he ended up with was something that confused me at first, and what then I realized later once I worked it out was that he was allowing the rhythm of the Ratamacue to be loosely interpreted, which was that triplet variations that we were going through just a minute ago. Another twist he put on it was that he started with the double rather than the, which would feel more like the traditional Ratamacue. And then he ended with a bass drum note, so that last note of the triplet is the third note of a triplet. 1 ta ta, 2 ta ta, 3 ta ta, 4 ta ta. He starts with the left. I like to start with the right. So the point is, you start out with this military kind of dry, which doesn't sound like you could do much with it, but if you give yourself the creative license and stretch it out and experiment, you get that sound. Which really doesn't sound like a Ratamacue. The way I like to orchestrate it, and I did it in the demo song, is around the toms like this. In the time context, I'm feeling that as 16th note triplets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the double bass drum interpretations of the 3 Ratamacues. Again, I'm not a crazy speed player. I just like to use quick little embellishments with my double bass drum. And one of the things I like to do with this Ratamacue is to substitute the double hits of the triplet. The right-rights and the left-lefts now become right-left on the bass drum. Fairly familiar lick you've probably seen around the internet. The second interpretation is of the double Ratamacue. Just continue substituting those double bass drums. And the same with the triple. I like to stick on all the rights. If you want to alternate or play with the lefts, if that's more comfortable, go for it. Feels better just keeping them all on the rights for those doubles and the triple Ratamacues. So again, your hands are free to play whatever sticking you're comfortable with rather than having to stick to the Ratamacue sticking. You can also play unisons, hands at the same time. And when I do that, I like to hit cymbal crashes, usually with the snare drum. So those are my variations of the single, double, and triple Ratamacue, all inspired by Steve's interpretation of his Ratamacue in Up Close. Check that out again. Please also check out bradfrankdrums.com. You can get PDF downloads of these exercises and more drum videos and tips and articles. Check it out. Drop me a line there. You can send me an email or leave a comment. And stay tuned for the next in the series, which will be the single and double drag paradiddle.